All right, we are on the air, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to the August 20th work session, and we will start with our new city manager, at the regular session, she will become our new city manager. Emma Sager talking about city council policy lanes.
Thank you. And in true don't miss a beat fashion, this is just a continuance of the conversation we started in our last work session. So for anyone tuning in, and if you need a refresher, this idea of policy lanes, or sometimes lovingly called swim lanes, came out of your retreat in July as an idea for slightly more, providing some more formality to how we navigate and move forward work within different sort of policy spheres, and promote more leadership and empowerment of individual counselors, and also collaboration of counselors that might have shared interests. My goal for today is to talk as little as possible and have you guys talk a lot. So I just put a couple refreshers in. When I say policy lane, what do I mean? As I said, it's that topic area for which, or within which a counselor or counselors would be identified and empowered to track things that impact Milwaukie, identify and propose priorities and deliverables, gather input from colleagues and represent the full council perspective at various tables, and build coalitions to advance key initiatives in those areas. The reason we called them swim lanes is the idea that in our system of government, we have to be fluid. Our charter says that you will all vote on everything. So even if we have lane leaders, you all have a say in everything. And we know that in the world of policy, projects and initiatives can span multiple lanes. Sorry, I'm looking over Will's head. What's the objective here? Again, it's to support collaboration and leadership. We talked a little bit last time about if we move forward with this proposal, what's the kind of commitment you'd be making? So the policy lane leader would commit to represent council at both formal and informal tables where that policy area is discussed, report back to your colleagues on work that comes out of those committees, gather feedback on timely policy questions, and make sure that when you are representing the city's opinion in a policy area, that you are representing the full council opinion and accurately. And that you would also be kind of in a leadership role of proposing sort of what we should be prioritizing within that lane. I think one of the spirits of this idea was that it would really be about getting clearer on what our deliverables are in different areas and ensuring progress towards those. If you're not a lane leader, what are you committing to? You're committing to trust the lane leader to do the above, to connect with the lane leader when you are asked to weigh in on something that is in their sphere or in their lane, and to provide opinions in a timely manner when you're requested to by the lane leader. Okay, so at the last...
Can we go back to this?
Oh, of course.
Can we have a discussion on that?
You can, yeah.
So, when I look at the first two bullets, I think that we're doing that now. And I like the other bullets, but I think that there's some juice that's missing.
Okay.
And I think that juice is kind of in two areas. And I think that, if I'm going to take on one of these roles, I want to become a subject matter expert in this, which is a step beyond what I'm doing right now. Okay. And so, I really want to dig in and become very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And I think that is an investment and, quite frankly, a time commitment and everything else. And but when I see the bullet that says proposed policy lane priorities, that's a little too vanilla, and I'm looking for a little bit more juice there. And I think that I would look for the lane leader, portfolio manager, what do you want to call them, presents the options to the council and advocates for a solution. I don't want to come in and say, here's the 9 things we can do, you guys figure it out. I don't want to do that to you, okay? I'll say, these are the 9 things. This is the 3 that have low return. This 3 are, medium return, but these are the 2 that I think have real merit, and I'm recommending option 2.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of juice I want in this. Because if we do this, I want to make a commitment to do it. And so, I don't know, I'll shut up.
And does that look different if your policy lane topic is a council goal or not?
No, I don't think so.
I like where you're going with this. It made me think of two things. One, that we have this long list of committees that we liaise with. And maybe it's time to go through, like, with more discussion than we allow when we reshuffle things and actually determine if the attendance is needed and if that needs to be an official liaison sort of role. There are a lot of things that we go to that aren't our official liaison roles, but also bring value to the conversations that we have here. And it might be, I don't know, I guess when I think, so this is the second piece. That's more of just the nuts and bolts thing that came to mind. The second piece that comes to mind for me is that I really like to have more in-depth policy discussions with you. And because of the nature of public meeting laws, we can only really do that in these meetings, or if we team up with one other person, essentially. But I feel like a lot of the report back and even the recommendations on things are very benign. And I'd really actually like to get into the meat of some things and have a discussion about our priorities. That's, I think, where I was going when I suggested we talk about legislative agenda, because that also gets us to the point of differentiating, the work that we want to do here from that of League of Oregon Cities, or even the C4 letter that we talked about, a few weeks back. And that is an actionable item, and I'm bringing that recommendation through that liaison role and asking, permission from the council to submit our logo, but that is benign, right? I'd really like to dig in a little bit more and kind of figure out what we can come up with.
That's what I'm hoping these do. That's what I'm hoping, that this provides us that opportunity to really get into the meat and bones of what we each care about, right? And what aligns with, what we're doing in Milwaukie, comprehensive plan wise and everything like that, and what the public has been asking for. That's what I want to do too. I want to get into that meat and bone stuff.
So maybe in addition to talking about the specific issues that we want to show leadership in, we should also talk about the mechanism that we have here and what that report back looks like, because right now it's reports at the end of very long meetings.
Yeah.
And they're speedy. They're not just, bullet points, but it's like, I'm going to summarize a 2-hour meeting in this and this, which doesn't really give any of us an opportunity to know what it's like in the committees that we're showing up at, or to have some of that deeper conversation.
You'd have to have it had to be a regular agenda thing on either a work session or a study session or regular. You probably want to do it before a regular session.
In our retreat, we started to kind of get at that by saying, okay, so, I brought up youth engagement at the retreat as an issue that I think is not necessarily a policy lane, but rather just a value that I think that we should discuss is, does that fit with where we want the future of the city to go? And what that first step looks like is that, I'm putting together this panel of folks that will be at a work session or a study session. And there's that mechanism that's in place. But I feel like since sometimes there's a couple of weeks between the time that we see each other, it would be helpful to have either a visual, kind of like you love visuals, and I love that about you. And then I'm also looking at you, Mayor, like, a spreadsheet that actually lays out more of the granular detail things that say, okay, so at this stage in our year together, This is when the legislative session happens. This is when we need to be thinking about budgeting. This is, these types of things that we could start to factor into our policy discussions.
On a practical matter of time, you have any thoughts on how we juggle our time so that we can do what you proposed?
I think we could probably make our work sessions and study sessions a bit more effective. We could, that one I think is a mechanic thing. This other suggestion about making the meetings just run more smoothly and if we shorten the amount of time that we spend going through the items that are on the agenda. And I'm not saying shorten public hearings or things like that, those are important, but we do spend a lot of time wordsmithing and kind of, adjusting details of things when they've gone through various levels. So maybe that could be something that could be funneled to the city manager and, presented in advance or something like that, so that it frees up some more time for us to have discussions of the policies that are kind of rattling around in our heads.
Well, I like that idea. I have some other ideas.
Okay, what you got?
What if I just say, everything's fine with the water consortium, next? You gotta trust me. You gotta trust me that if something comes up with the water consortium and your drinking water, I'm gonna let you know.
I mean, having served on that one, I happen to know that's not one that has a lot of deep policy discussions that we need to have.
Thank you, Mayor.
But I do think it's one that has tools that we don't use, that we should be using as a city. It has social media and other public outreach tools about water conservation, about emergency preparedness and stuff like that we don't use. So I mean, I think there's information to be gleaned, but I do take the difference between here's what happened in this meeting, take 3 minutes, and a policy discussion. And does the policy discussion come on? Maybe those need to be, ideally, I guess, those need to be on an agenda with potentially some reading material that's in the packet ahead for people to read up. They're gonna come up in times when we don't have time for that. There's gonna be deadlines of, whatever decision-making level it's at, state or metro or whatever, where we're not gonna have time for all that, but it does seem like they should be called out on the agenda as something and not just be kind of lumped into council reports.
Right.
And you only put something on the agenda when you have a policy issue that needs to be addressed, right? Because you wouldn't then you can just do regular updates within your council reports. But if there's something that needs addressing, just to make sure it gets enough of that time, because then we can give it whatever we need.
I will say here, as we think about how to make it more timely, I think it's good that we're stopping on this slide, because as we talk about policy lanes, we're talking about two things. We're talking about how do we do better on the policies themselves, and how do we do better as a team to advance our goals in the abstract, separate from any specific policy. And I think this is where, maybe I'm jumping a slide, but as we think about over the next few months, figuring this out and piloting this, I think if we all take, as opposed to a suite of 17 policy lanes, picking something a little bit smaller and saying, we'll each take one small policy that we're gonna pilot this with and test it out to really emphasize this slide here. The policy we're still working on, but it's how we work together and how we do our reports, how we do bring something onto the agenda. I think getting that right is gonna be really important over the next few months, and then allows us to take on a much wider policy suite with a bunch of different topics at once.
So specificity. So specify a specific thing that you want to work on that's within that policy lane, and take that as opposed to carrying a whole policy lane that can sometimes be.
Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying, let's just each take one policy lane for now and reassess in the new year?
let me say, that's what both of you are saying. I think that,
So what are you saying?
I think the idea is, as opposed to taking on,
Specific project.
yeah, everyone takes, it's kind of, if we look at the packet, on attachment 1.2, or even if we go to this slide, as opposed to taking on
Opposed to
as opposed to taking on these giant topics with a lot of underlying things that will require a lot of work, and then our reports are 50 minutes long as we try and go through every bullet, we say, we'll go through just one of these things. If we want to make it so Council President Massey takes on finance, and that is the one thing he does, and he reports in every report about the finance thing. He reaches out to Councilor Stavanger to talk about a specific thing. It like narrows the scope to make it a little bit more manageable, so we can focus at the same time on our policy, on our role as a lane leader, and see how that works before we take on everything.
Yeah, like say if he took finance, right, but his was the revenue streams that we threw up there, right? And his focus was on, because we all talked about revenue, maybe that's what his specificity would be on, picking 3 of those revenue streams we talked about and then doing a deep dive into that.
I mean, that's
Just-
something staff's already working on, right? So, but you're saying work
Yeah, because, I mean, we'd all have to work with staff on any of these.
more.
Yeah, because we're gonna have to work on any of these projects with staff regardless. Like, say if I took the lead on Sparrow, I've been throwing a lot of stuff at the wall with that one. I would not necessarily be the only one doing it, but I would basically discuss with the council what the focus would be on that. And then I would take the lead addressing those focus areas and then report that back. Like, for example, a meeting with Dev Northwest. I'd bring that on, I'd put that on the agenda to say, okay, here's another option for this site, right? And then that would narrow my scope within that housing and human services lane, because to be a specific project. And then I would obviously work with Councilor Stavanger as the co-lead on that as well. So basically just narrowing the scope to something specific that maybe the city's already working on or we haven't got done yet, or something that's in the comp plan that's in these policy lanes that we want to focus on specifically to get done. So for the, again, housing and human services, the focus would be Sparrow. It wouldn't be Sparrow plus, every other thing that falls under that umbrella.
To get out what you're saying, you're almost saying, we set aside housing and human services, the policy lane, we'll set that aside. That's a conversation for another day. Let's pilot where I take on Sparrow, see what it looks like as you're saying this is a test case type of thing where you experiment with what it's like to be a lane leader. We all can touch base and say, this worked, this didn't, this lane leader did a good thing on this element of the project.
Right.
And then commit to a suite where we tie it all together.
Right, and each person can take something specific in their lane. I don't have to be the only one, but if you guys want to use me as a test pilot, I'd have no problem doing that.
So I will say it seems to me that can be done, but there are a couple of different types of questions we're talking about here. Because something like Sparrow and frankly, something like finance are things where we as lay people don't have the expertise, and you really will need to meet with staff and have an understanding from staff about what the parameters are and what the process is.
Right.
Whereas some of the things that are legislative, that are, what do we want to support in terms of housing legislation that might be coming up, or the transportation package or something. Some of those are not things our staff is going to have, more expertise than us. But some of these things are really, the staff is going to have a lot of expertise. And so we have to be careful to not be just going out there on Sparrow or whatever.
And
without-
I think I appreciate that, Mayor, and I think that this goes back to kind of why the word policy was kind of important in the first proposal. I still think we could go down to this more specificity track, but just keeping an eye out if we do go that way and taking Sparrow as an example, say I called them hot topics, right? There's 10,000 foot view work that's being done that's staff led, and there's 30,000 foot work that's being done, which is the policy level of goals and values and direction and coalition building. And so whether we're at the granular level like this or we're staying in a lane level, we do need to, I think, just clarify what the what the actions are we're asking to be taken. And I do think you guys are policymakers. There can definitely be engagement and collaboration with staff, but I don't want you to feel like you're becoming the project manager for Sparrow.
No, yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It would be more about gathering the options for council to consider to then give staff direction to do something with it, right? That's kind of how we generate policy anyways. You know? We bring something on the agenda, we discuss it, and then based on what we decide, we give staff direction to then do that. You know, and it's not something that for Sparrow, to use an example, I've been in constant contact with our city manager, going through the proper channels, and Joseph, our community development coordinator, director. How many titles does he have? Right, so it's not something that I'm just taking and running with myself. I'm making sure that staff is aware of what's going on. I'm sharing the information when I'm meeting with these organizations, because that's been a goal of that site for a long time. It's not like we recreated that goal. And since the discussion for Sparrow was coming up, I was hoping to get something to actually discuss, as opposed to saying, what do you want to do, figuring that out. And then, I'm just using this as an example. I'd rather have something meat and bones, meat and potatoes that we can actually discuss when that's on the agenda. And then maybe at that point, we can give staff direction, as opposed to waiting another 3 months to figure out what to do.
Well, I mean, I think there were goals set for the Sparrow side, and they were set by a council that, I'm the only one still from that council. So we do need to look at those goals again. I think if we had a Sparrow meeting tomorrow, we would have plenty to discuss.
Yeah.
Because we need to revisit those goals and see if they're still the goals that everybody thinks we want to.
And I think
target for that side.
in this example, then if we come out of this and that is either the lane you're leading or the hot topic you're leading, you could tee up that conversation about, I think it's worth revisiting the goals, the policy goals for this project. Here's my why, and then back to what Councilor Massey was saying, it's not, here's the 40 options we have. It's, I've taken some subject matter expertise here and I have a recommendation to make to my colleagues.
And I'll say,
Well, I just have a couple of thoughts. I feel like there's something kind of in the middle that is within the area of, I'm not the subject matter expert. The staff are the subject matter experts. And yet I am asking more than 1 hour of their time. So, and I'll use the example of youth engagement again. I've had conversations with our city manager, with a couple of amazing team members within the city staff. I've put together kind of a proposal to consider, but I took it to the staff. And then the decision that I took to council was, are you all okay with me taking more than an hour of their time to discuss this, to vet it, to bring it back to you all in a study session? And that, I don't need to be the subject matter expert in this. And even if I were, it's not appropriate for me to be the leader on that. It's most appropriate and most sustainable for that leadership to come from within the city and within the staff. So the questions really that I should be watching for in this are, at what point does this rival a goal? At what point do we need to have a conversation about, some type of resource that would be necessary for this? Or is it something that just kind of dovetails into what we have had in practice before? But I don't want to be the leader of that conversation. I want the council to discuss that with me. So that's why, in order to get it to the point where the council has a good discussion, I need more than an hour of time. And so that's where I feel like there's that, go, no go conversation.
And do you think it's the council that says you can have more than an hour of time, or it's the city manager who says?
Well, the
you can have-
mechanism we have in place right now is that if anything, this is the code of conduct that we've signed, that if anything takes more than an hour of time, then I need to make that presentation to council. And I need to have a conversation with you all and ask your permission to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I personally think, I hope that the city manager is part of that conversation. And if I'm being a good counselor, then I will have had that conversation in advance. So if there are any things that aren't comfortable to have, said in a public meeting, that you and I can just talk through that, and we have.
And I would say from this management side, what's nice about a policy lane matrix like what I've got on the screen is then I know that really I'm only going to get those slightly larger than an hour asks from the one or two people in those categories. And if it's coming from someone else, then they will have checked in with those people. In our current system, that could come from any of you on any topic at any time, which is fine, but I do think it kind of slows us down sometimes when it's a little unclear who the leader is in different spaces. Like in this case, if we did proceed with something like this, even if we went with these lanes, but then that kind of specific assignment of a couple projects or a project within them, what I could do is work with those leaders or that lead and say, let's look 6 months ahead. Let's look at the forecaster. What are the milestones are coming up? What are the topics we want to seed? And it's just a much more strategic way, I think, to approach our time in our meetings than the more sort of ad hoc, we're adding things as reactive as things are coming to us.
I would make an observation. I think you are a subject matter expert on the topics of social services in the county. And I think it's served us well.
Well, I appreciate that observation. And I think we all bring our special tools to this, but that we've put into practice. We've had meaty discussions about these things. We've had presentations that have come to, we've really had a chance to flex our muscles around that issue. And that, I think, as someone who does have a background in that area, it makes me really excited for the city to lead in this space. So I don't know if we have capacity to lead in all of these spaces, though. I mean, I'm looking at the list and I wouldn't want to balloon the work in all of the areas that have my name next to them. But I would want to work with the city manager to kind of figure out within the forecaster what makes sense to bring big conversations to y'all. But
So in the proposal,
I'm bad at taking compliments.
Trying to do that.
to kind of try to bridge what I think I'm hearing. I mean, if we were to proceed with this proposal, let's take Rebecca and Adam in the Housing and Human Services section. You come into this list and there's 6 hot topics within Housing and Human Services. In this proposal, then I think what I would do is I would look to my lane leaders to say, okay, do all 6 of those need the same level of attention? Are there a couple where you just want an annual update or a 6-month update? Are there a couple where you are really rolling up your sleeves and you want big study session time to dig into this? But I'm kind of empowering you to tell me and tell staff how to allocate time on your agendas for those things. So it's a little bit in between just picking one and one person, one thing. But it's not as broad as now you have to track every single thing in the universe of this lane and give it all the same level of attention.
I like that. I like the teamwork that it creates because I know that there are many of us who have shared expertise in these areas. And I want to hear from my colleagues about that.
Absolutely. Divided 50.
Maybe as you're thinking through this, and that might be helpful for us to run kind of a scan of what's internal work and what's external work. So a couple of the things within the list of Housing and Human Services are definitely things that would take more than an hour of staff time, but they are not things that would require really in-depth study sessions and work sessions and decisions that we would be making.
Right.
And some of them are.
Well, that's the thing,
That was the only
outside
one
is
that's-
kind of on its way, right? I don't know what, I mean, there will be a phase two, so.
The
maybe
staff
it's-
work on that is, my building team and engineering as things come through, but there's not a lot of policy direction needed there right now. Whereas Sparrow, as the mayor said, brand new council that I think does need to either reaffirm or change the policy goals for that site. And that's where staff will do the work. We will do the development of RFPs and the public engagement and all that, but we need policy direction from you. Stabilization Center is another interesting one where I think it's a bit of a hybrid, right? And we're finding right now actually that we're running into some challenges where there's staff to staff conversations, there's elected to elected conversations, and it's sort of, ooh, we're sort of all swimming in this pool and need to right now because the policy conversations and the logistics conversations are happening so fast together. And that's okay, but we just kind of, everyone's a little case by case. And what I like about this structure is it gives my team a lot more clarity of who to work with on those case by case pieces. So just to kind of summarize what,
USA though,
real big.
biggest thing
I love Bay City. I
do
excited
too.
about Bay City.
Mayor Beatty's got measure 5 and 50. Good luck.
Yeah, I'm not. 550, yeah, this will need some editing. I mean, that's an example of something that, I mean, we have no control, right? I mean, all it is keeping tabs on what's going on in terms of discussions, or what comes out of whatever LOC is doing. I mean, I'm happy to do that, but it's not like we're gonna
Right.
have some policy about measure 5 and 50.
Totally.
We're only we're one little sliver of a big,
Yeah.
so I mean, that is the difference in like, yeah, some of these things are very specific to us and some of them are, yeah, we don't have any control or see 800 radios, you
Yep.
know?
And to connect this to the legislative questions, I appreciate Councilor Savinjord gave me the language last week of you have your asks and you have your watches, right? What are you asking for? What's your watch list? You could probably divide a lot of these. Some of these are we're watching. We're making sure that we're not letting it get way out of hand, but we're not really doing a lot actively. But there's some things on here where we're asking for something. We may be asking from the legislature on some of them or very few of them, but we're asking from our staff, we have asks, we want to move things forward.
So I guess my worry in this whole thing is that we are, by saying we're gonna come out and we're gonna go through these things and come up with proposals, not always, not all of them are involved in proposals, but some significant number are. I do think we're adding to the work of the staff and we're sort of creating mini goals or something. I think that's the danger, I guess, and that's just something, I mean, maybe it's still worth doing and over the next 5 months until we, have our goal discussion again. But I do think we just need to keep an eye out
Yeah.
for that. Work creep or it's not mission creep, but something like
scope creep.
scope creep, yeah.
I will say I have, seeing this list, I kind of go, oh my, there's another list to this too, right? This is slide 1 of,
This is like the topics or the initiatives. This is the committees.
okay. Going back to the topics then, what I feel a little worried about is we have expressed in our retreat an interest to be really committed to deliverables and finding success in everything that we take on. And I worry that this is such an expansive list that this almost decouples us from committing to, my concern is if we agree to take on something, I want to see a clear deliverable and action that's coming from you taking something on as the lead. And so that means that if measure 5 and 50 is what you're taking on, there's a reason why we're taking it on. You're saying there's no reason, which I think is fair. So why even have it on the list? If we do take it on, what is our work path that we clearly want to have as a council? And what are we committing to there? And I worry if there's a laundry list of 50 plus things, we've kind of lost our initial purpose of having a clear deliverable.
I hear you, Will. I will say that this list is stuff that I actively have emails or conversations with all of you every day. So, and there's no judgment in that. That's just an observation that we are working on all these things.
Just noticed.
What might be a helpful next step then, if in general, no one's looking at this and going, why is my name there? Ugh. If we're kind of happy with where we're sort of falling, maybe a next step is you stretch your muscles a little bit as a lane leader and you come back to me and say, there are 5 things in this category that's way too much. I'm actually thinking we should really focus on this. And if there's 2 names there in that category, you work with your partner and you come back with that proposal. But I agree with you, this list is too long, but right now this is the reality.
That's fair.
We're doing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, most of the stuff on here, we're already working on. And some of it won't require, like the mayor was saying, like, say 100 radios, there's not much that I'll probably be more of a
That's fine.
liaison to that, if anything comes up, to bring that back to, at the most, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's one where, the damage, it's a mess and, and it's done and there's not much to be done about it.
Just watch it, yeah.
I see this potentially as also taking some workload off of staff by us carrying some of this work ourselves. So I do see
Making
it.
it worse for them.
Yeah, that's my worry.
Well, as long as we're not directing them, because we can't do that. We can't direct staff to do our own
Where it would, I think,
council.
where it would alleviate some capacity concerns is the knowing who our point people are to work with on certain things. I do, and this is my job, is just to always remind us what the staff level work is and what the policy level work
I
is.
would remind people that, believe it or not, the staff sees the power gap between themselves and you. It's kind of hard to believe. Don't really think of yourself.
When you look at Councilor Anderson, you say, whoa.
But they do, they do. And I will tell you that don't underestimate the amount of wheel spinning and effort spent when you ask a single question.
Which is why Ann had the rule that you didn't contact. You only contacted director level, you didn't contact staff below the director level, right?
But how much, because I maybe I'm thinking of it differently, because I was thinking that whatever updates we get would come through you in our weekly meetings anyways, so we wouldn't really have direct.
And that's a rule I'd like to maintain.
We would go through,
But-
continue to go through you, and that would just be part of our weekly meeting updates.
But my hope is that we can more focus our weekly meetings on the things that then get narrowed down on this list.
Can I throw one more bomb?
Please.
If we go back to the lane slide, the overview, I think we lose a little bit of our effectiveness if we have 2 lane leaders on 1 lane. And I think that to some degree, we have to be willing to say, okay, I won't take on a certain lane or I'll step back from this lane. Because it allows, my worry is if you're taking on, let's say, economic development. If I'm in the room with Councilor Kosarbati every time, it prevents Councilor Kosarbati going, Council President Massey, I'd love to talk with you about this. But also my lane buddy has to come in and suddenly we're at quorum. I think by empowering one person to take charge and taking that hard hit of saying, listen, Councilor Kosarbati, you take economic development, I will step back and it's all yours. We allow a little bit more conversation to happen. And it's not a serial meeting, but it's those one-offs of this specific thing is happening in economic development and I'd love to meet with you about this.
I think that's a legitimate point.
It is. But I also think that maybe that's something that in some lanes you can do that, in others you can't. There's some lanes that might have a lot of meat and potatoes in them that you can't eat yourself and might have to share that workload.
Well, I'm thinking of something right now that I just listened to today, a tape, and I had questions for me on housing that I want to send to the state. And I was thinking, I will coordinate my questions with Counselor Savagord, because she happens to be the liaison to the committee where it arose.
Right.
But then it's only her and me and it's not you, right? And if you're co-lane leaders, then yeah. how
But
does
she
that
could
work?
update me later. We and her can have a
That's our
word.
cereal.
Oh, shit.
And this is also where I'll say to council,
That's called a dunk tank right there. I love it again.
to Council President Massey's point, I think a goal is that we become subject matter experts in a lane where, like, if there is a housing thing, I know implicitly that Councilor Stavanger is the person to talk to, and we can have that conversation, and like, I can learn from her perspective. And I think by taking sole control over that lane, it's not that you're preventing any conversations. No, you're leaning into that more, but it also lets you become a little bit more of an expert and have that justification. Thoughts? I see the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like, we all do have specialties that we bring, and that makes our council wonderful. But it is impossible to rely on just one person to be the keeper of all knowledge on a particular issue area.
Especially some of these are very.
And I feel like that is a rub for our mayor especially, because there are conversations that you are privy to with the Metro Mayors Consortium, with the check-ins that you have with the chair, the county chair. And you may hear some things that come up in those conversations that get your wheels turning. And I'm over here in other committees and those things are turning, but they're turning at a different, level of turbulence because that we're getting in that committee a staff presentation. And you're getting a conversation that has the infusion of elected priority setting. So I know that that conversation, if you and I connected and we had that conversation, we've done this on a number of things in the last year and a half. So that makes the common product better. But then it is just a you and me conversation. And so I think, I don't want to speak for you. I feel as if some of the things that you'll send to the whole council are in an effort to make sure that everyone knows about some of those discussions that you're having. But because we have, a serial deliberation kind of situation, I can't then respond to that email and say, oh, that came up in this committee as well. I have to then do that during our committee reports. So it makes it a little complicated. And then there might be information, I'll use another example. We talked in our last regular session about Clackamas County's application for deflection. And the mayor was, man, you must just sit like on your computer. The mayor beat me by maybe 10 minutes on an email that had the resolution of the whole thing. And that's, I appreciate that information sharing, but it was also the resolution information. I'm not sure if you had just seen that, on the news coverage, but I had the information that came from the DA specifically that had like some extra tidbits. And that's what I wanted to share out to the whole council. And so I feel like we run in.
Precluded from doing that.
No, but I have to wait until
You
this.
don't reply on mine and you send it out as a separate thing.
Oh, that
think you
feels
could
weird
totally
to
do
me.
that.
Justin?
Justin?
You wanna do some legal, phone a friend, legal?
In a situation where a topic has been brought up in an email to everyone.
But it's just a newspaper.
It's a newspaper article about the deflection program being approved. If Councillor Stavanger then had additional information from a different source, if Councillor Stavanger sent a separate email to all staff and said, here's my article with a little more information, is that serial meeting?
I mean, my answer is always going to be, I don't like all council emails. You're,
Well, so much.
well, then that could be interpreted a couple of different ways. One,
Are you ever invited to the party?
yeah, nobody wants to listen to me talk.
Kind of slid in at the big table.
I want to go back to the kids. No, I mean, essentially what happens in that situation is that maybe a different point of view is in that second article. So in some ways you're deliberating via surrogate, right? Here's what I think. Oh yeah, well here's what, so where does it end? That's the problem. You're inviting the issue's a little bit, I look at it a little bit.
Felt weird to me.
Yeah, the issue's a little
It's
bit.
information. I mean, it wasn't inviting,
Well,
I certainly didn't feel like I was inviting a conversation. I was just sharing information out of the news.
That's fine. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with just sharing information, but a lot of times what that does is it has the impact of shutting down somebody else who might want to add to that conversation, and they can't, because now you're actually deliberating. And so it goes off into this holding space where, hey, I've said my piece, and I may have said my piece via a surrogate. Here's my article, right? It's news. Well, maybe you have a different point of view, but you're shut down in your ability to respond to that. Or the other aspect is you never know how somebody's going to respond to something. So when you send something out there, you're inviting them to a fight that they can't really fight. Because maybe your information is contrary to what they think. Right? And now I'm not using this specific example as something, I'm just, that the water starts to spin around the toilet bowl pretty fast. Like once you flush, it goes, right? There's not a lot of safeguards. And so the safeguard is use some restraint in sending that, or you have to use a lot of restraint in not responding to it.
So on that one, I interpreted more conservatively, I think, than you would have, Mayor. Because I thought since we had talked about it in the meeting, I had made it clear that I was putting this letter forward. I offered, you all to send your letters as well, which some of you did, and thank you. And then the next step in information sharing in my mind is, what's the resolution? And then I think in my interpretation, it's just the way that I don't know, like I've been trained, is that in sending the resolution in even a news article, that closed the conversation until we get to our, regular session again. And then, we have our reports. But I don't know how everyone else interprets.
Yeah, I will tell you that that's the interpretation from the state attorney general. That's the guidance every government lawyer gets, and you will never find a city attorney who tells you otherwise. I mean,
I think
it's just
Gold star.
it's very,
I don't think that was the compliment,
Yeah.
the same level as the last one you gave me.
it's very, when serial meetings became an issue with electronic communication, the case that resulted in that being attorney general guidance didn't solve the problem. It didn't say, hey, you can do this and you can't do this. It's very gray. And so to avoid wading into gray, it's kind of like when you get kids, like if you let them do something one time, they're going to assume they can do it the next time, the next time, and the next time. And it's just, it could get out of control really easily.
I don't know. I think we all know when something is a policy question that we're maybe going to have to make a decision on versus when we are purely sharing information about a decision that was made by somebody else. And I guess I don't see that that's deliberation to share information about something that's going on in another body.
You never get a chance to explain your side of things when it shows up in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Public records requests, you never get a chance to respond to.
A hypothetical workflow with this system is, would it be appropriate for, let's say Mayor Beatty finds this article and you're the policy lane for, would that be human services? Would it be acceptable, oh, you're not at the hot seat yet, Justin. Yeah. Would it be acceptable for the mayor to send Councillor Stavengerd a article saying, hey, this might be helpful? And maybe Councillor Stavengerd has a weekly report about human services that compiles all of the things that we might be interested in human services that includes the article the mayor sent her. Would that be something that runs afoul of public meeting laws, or?
I mean, I need a piece of paper and a legal pad to
Sure.
draw out your scenario, right? I mean, it's just a general hesitancy. You're going to get legal guidance from any city attorney is going to tell you to avoid email correspondence between members of the body.
Okay.
I mean, it's written exactly, I don't have it right in front of me, but it is absolutely stated specifically in the Attorney General's Public Records Meeting and Public Meetings Manual. That that's the guidance that the Attorney General gives. And that's how city attorneys and county attorneys, that's how we're all trained.
Now,
Yeah.
but you're talking, I mean, his example was 1-to-1, not 1-to-all.
So my interpretation would be if I sent the email and I said, I had a great conversation with Mayor Beatty about this, and she thought you all should see this email, that would be serial deliberation. But if the chain, you send me, I mean, this is easier because it's a news article.
Yep.
You sent it to me, said, hey, you might have an update coming up, thought this would be helpful. And then in an email that I send, I just stop the chain there and say, this is the information that you all should know about this issue this week. And it would be difficult not to say, thank you, Counselor Anderson, for sending some information, but I would need to kind of screen it out at that point. That would be my
You really have to be, the care here is to avoid, and we talk about all council emails or folks, things like that, a lot of it. And, I do, you guys receive emails from me when I catch you guys deliberating. I get all of these emails and I tell you, hey, refrain from doing this. So the temptation is large. And I don't necessarily trust you all because you are all hyper-focused on what you're doing and you want to talk about it. And, there are other times that I haven't stepped in when I think I probably could have, but I let it go at the 2. Because and then if the next one comes in, then you're gonna get a slap down from me, right?
What about when we voted the Mike's Drive-In Huckleberry?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't gotten an email yet from the Attorney General on that. All of these communications go directly to the state.
Why even bring it up?
Even general sideboard.
We're on the record now.
I don't even know how we got.
I know, okay, so
It's probably-
it's been a good conversation, but we are once again over time on this topic. Here's a few, I don't think we're yet at consensus on one person per lane, scrap the lanes, go to the hot topic. So I'm gonna need you to kind of help me about where you want to go next. The timely piece I really do need to resolve is the committee assignments, just because that is something that, there's some of these that are formal appointments. Looking down this list, so kind of ignore the lanes for a second. I don't think there are really many changes here, with the exception of Counselor Anderson taking the TSP AC spot, which was something that I know Counselor Anderson and Counselor Stavanger had talked to me about. So I want to make sure everyone's aware of that and is able to ask any questions or express any concerns.
So it's not an addition, it's a substitution.
Yeah.
And then
I'm the representative to the PARB.
you're the representative of the
Yes,
PARB,
I'm
okay?
not- I'm not,
So that one,
that's wrong.
that would get changed back. And then I think there was one for you,
And West
Adam.
Advisory
West.
Committee, isn't that?
Wes, Wes currently is Counselor Kausar-Body. Because of the policy lanes thing, my proposal was that would fit in the public utilities and go to Council President Massey, but we can leave that as is.
Just a suggestion, I don't think that the Homeless Solutions Coalition needs to be an official liaison
Okay,
position.
okay.
Well, and I have that question about the childcare task force too. I mean, it's been interesting. I've been sitting in it this year, because I found out that nobody was sitting in it for a year, when we thought a former counselor was. It's interesting. I like kind of knowing what's going on there, but it's not a thing where we really have a role. I mean, we might get called on to, for a letter of support for some proposal here or there, but it's really professionals it's either county agencies or professionals in the childcare industry and in education. So, yeah, I don't feel like it.
Okay,
I'd like to still attend it though.
Oh, you can. And I'm happy to, introduce you to.
Yeah.
Introductions.
What would you like to do about Wes? Would you like to keep Wes?
I like clean water, you take dirty water.
Okay.
Okay.
You sure? We got that Clacamo boring machine on its way over here.
Clack-a-mole.
I do love that.
Thought my name was
We'll-
better.
We'll talk about it again if we come to grips with.
Okay.
You know,
The policy
the
lines.
over here.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't mind keeping it either, so whatever
And-
works for you.
And so, what would be helpful from your city manager to move this this action item from your retreat forward? You now have, in your, and I can send you the Excel version, you've got this table and the one that's a lot more detailed. I don't want to just give up on this. I think this was a really valiant goal or valiant objective that you came up with, but it does seem like we're struggling to come to consensus on sort of where to move forward. Does anyone want to propose something as a next step?
Well, I guess maybe in our one-on-ones, we should have conversations with you about what we see as our passion or
Yeah.
our best fit. For example, here,
Okay.
I don't want
So if each person kind of came to me and said, based on this list, if I had to pick one, what I would pick is this. And if we magically come out with 5 unique things, that's great. And if there's some crossover, we'll talk about that.
I mean, I could see us going one of two ways. One is everyone picks one thing that they really want to do, and that's our pilot project that we do to start. If we are doing lanes, I don't know, like this is where maybe we do a good job communicating consensus to Emma. Is there consensus around one person per lane? Because I think it might be helpful to see a proposal from you, Emma, with one person per lane, but I don't know if there is consensus for that.
I like the hot topics better. I think it's more specific
Yeah.
and it allows for flexibility within those areas. you
Yeah.
know? That's,
So everyone picks a hot topic they like.
And get more done within one lane. Tackle.
So you're saying we're not having a whole lane, we're having a hot topic.
I think this topic lead
Hot bucket.
is more appropriate for where we're at if we're going to try and test something. But I also think that we need to think about what our role is. There's a column for leader. We've also talked about things that you're just monitoring. So if it feels better that in the conversations you have access to, Mayor, you're just monitoring and sending us information as it becomes available for 5 and 50, that might be a better fit than a leader on that issue. Because
Yep.
you may or may not feel compelled to, do a bunch of research, become an expert. So I would feel comfortable, like if we start to include in our council reports the things that we're monitoring. And there's then this extra step of like, when it becomes something that becomes forecasted. So like we can be a liaison on a committee, we can share updates on these things, but when it becomes so much work that we've requested permission to, take additional staff time, and it becomes something that we put into the forecaster, then I feel like it's a separate, like, it's an asterisk or something.
So is that a hot topic or is that something else?
Well, I mean, I think that borders on, honestly, in competition with council goals. Which, if there's like, Anne is I won't tell you which shoulder Anne's. But, I can hear her voice where she would have said, well, we only have 3 goals. So something has to come off. And I feel like, honestly, we are all very driven people who love our community. Let's be real, like we're excited about all of these things because we don't have a specific council work plan and set of things that we're each doing in the council goal areas.
And I think what you're saying too, Rebecca, is we can try this out. We'll learn a lot about what that model looks like, how you go from idea to something that's forecasted. That will help us when we get to goal setting, set better goals and be clear about what those goals are. And then we kind of reevaluate you know?
And I would say to Robert's first point about let's stop and talk about what the role of a policy leader is, not just setting better goals, but figuring out what our role is in being liaisons for these goals and advancing them. If I'm being really bold, maybe we don't need to do it in our one-on-ones to pick out what our focus, hot topic is. We can say, no, we want to do it in one-on-one and slow down, but I think we all have a sense of maybe what we would want to take on. That could get us to a resolution today as opposed to another meeting, or?
No, I think we need to do it in our one-on-ones, frankly. I don't know that it's just one for me, but it's,
Why don't we give it a round or two of one-on-ones for discussion as we think about this? And then when it seems to you that you have consensus from us, then let's bring it back for a discussion here.
Great, that sounds great. Okay, and because of time, we're gonna talk legislative priorities as part of those one-on-one conversations and bring that back too.
well, you're gonna send us the LOC stuff, right?
Yes, I'll send you the LOC stuff. I got the survey for that that's due in September, so I'll send that out. But I do think, yeah, as you're thinking through this, I really appreciated Counselor Stavenjord's lingo of a watch list and an ask list. And that might help you think about in your passion areas, what are you putting on your sort of watch burner versus your I'm leaning in and I'm asking for something here. Okay, thanks team. More to come in one-on-ones. Let's move to grants and have Jen come up and join us. Thank you, Nicole. So this next item is somewhat related to the item we just finished, but I've received a few questions from council over the last few weeks and months about grants that the city is pursuing. What grants is the city pursuing? How does the city decide what grants to pursue? And so I thought it was a really good opportunity for us to come and share what current practice is. It sparked some internal conversations of how we might improve internal practice. So I want to kind of share where we're trying to go and then show you the list of what pursuits we are actively tracking. The bulk of them are in engineering, which is why Jen is here, and Jen can talk about what's in the hopper and you can ask her questions. So yeah, we'll talk about the current strategy, a proposed sort of update to that process, the active pursuits list, and then I really want to hear from you. Any concerns about those active pursuits? How do you want to be kept apprised and involved? And then I'm going to leave this one as a think about it and talk to me in our one-on-ones. But as we crystallize these hot topics or these lanes, how does that connect into the grant conversation? In terms of grants in Milwaukie, I mean, we rely on grants. We're so small and there's so many things on our CIP we can't do without grants. But other than that, we don't have a grants team. I don't have a grant coordinator. We are sort of building the plane as we fly it. The one piece of grant policy I could find, it comes from our budget. It's this big paragraph here that basically just says grants got to run through the city manager. In practice, how this has looked is that it's really been a department by department thing. Wonderful folks like Jen and like Tanya are scanning for those opportunities. How do we get something from our CIP moving forward? What grant opportunities are out there? But there really hasn't been a coordinated strategy among departments to look at that as a whole and do a cost benefit analysis of, okay, we could get this much money, but how much time is it going to take to write it? How much time is it going to take to administer it? So we're kind of in this space where we know we're leaving money on the table. We know there's probably more we could go after, and maybe we should be. But we also know every time you get a grant, that adds some capacity needs. So it's a little bit of a limbo. This is a lot of words, but I just want you to know that we are taking this seriously, and we're working with the directors team and with other managers on sort of what could a more coordinated process look like. I still want to empower my staff who know their needs better than anyone to be scanning for those opportunities. And I also want to continue to encourage you all to do that. It's been really helpful when Counselor Anderson and Counselor Kosarabadi have sent me a few things. I'm like, hey, is the city aware of this? That's great. I never want to shut that down. When we find something that might be a fit, we ask ourselves a few questions. Do we have a project that fits that criteria? We don't want to be making up projects for money. We just have enough to do already in our CIP. 2, do we have the capacity to write the application? Or do we have someone we can maybe outsource that grant writing to? And then how big of a lift is this going to be for our staff and for our finance department to administer? We're going to start making go, no-go decisions at the director's team, not to add bureaucracy, but just to make awareness of, oh, I didn't know Peter was thinking about that. Let's make sure everyone knows before we say yes. Whenever grants do get to the threshold where they require council approval, of course, they'll be added to the forecaster and brought here. And we're going to...
What is that level?
Well, anything over 250,000 honestly would be coming your way. So majority of,
It's
the bigger,
basically
right.
the same as the.
Yeah.
it's the same as the procurement.
Yeah.
If we decide to go, there will still be a step to review before it gets sent in. And then we're going to be setting up a slightly better tracking mechanism. Like to prepare for this staff report, I sort of did a call out, send me what grants you're pursuing. We have amazing admins who I think can help us put that on one spreadsheet and just keep track of it in a little bit of a more coordinated fashion. So now moving to the active pursuits, I'm going to have Jen talk about the 4 that are in the hopper for engineering.
So I'm going to stand because I can't actually see this behind my back of my head. So the first one is our Safe Routes for All, an SS4A grant, and we submitted that this May. And that is to basically hopefully fund our new roundabout that I'd like to do. And it was developed, what would be the best scenario to get that grant? And so we said, okay, it's our arterial. We need to look at 99E down Harrison all the way to 42nd and then to King at 43rd, where we have the start of our King Road project. So that was set up in that scenario. This is to get a study. How much is it going to cost? This is a different bucket. We haven't applied for this since I've been here. If we get this study, we would go for implementation dollars the following year. So it's setting us up to actually go for the implementation dollars for that. There's a lot of requirements. It is federal dollars. So there's a lot of things we got to check off to be able to do that. But it's set up because Harrison has many, many, many accidents on it. And so it's a big one we keep coming back to is like, oh, we kind of need to tackle this. So that's where that one's developed.
And when do you expect to hear?
Any day now, actually.
Oh, really? So,
Yeah, we're actually hoping to hear probably pretty soon if we're going to get that study to be able to do. And then we'd be 400,000. We have a match in there, part of that. But yeah, we would be moving that forward.
Does the application specify a contractor, or will we have to go out to bid and build that into the timeline?
We have to go out to bid. We have to bring on a qualified consultant to do the work. It's 400,000. It's more than what we can. Yeah, we would. It's a study, so it's really looking at a lot of what's happening on the corridor. What safety concerns do we need to bring about? So we would be bringing on a consultant for sure to do the work.
Okay.
And we had B&N put in the application for us. So, yeah. Safe Routes to School, that went in July 31st. So that I got a ton of help from the community, which was fantastic, really. It was a neat opportunity to work with them. But yes, so we hear probably more like October. So that has been submitted.
and
Yeah.
I mean, you sound like the work they did prepping it, that then you could, finalize it, that worked pretty well?
Yes, I wouldn't have been able to do it without
Yeah.
their help,
Okay.
for sure.
Good to
Yeah.
know.
They did a lot of the groundwork. They did a lot of pulling the wordsmithing things. I did the final like cut as far as what was going on, how are we gonna address it. We did the cost estimate and things like that, but they got photos and letters of support. We've submitted a ton of letters of support. It was great. So really good support in that sense. We're trying to go for 3 million. And if we get it, we can spend it. So I did say in there, we would take a partial. If we take a partial, then we have to decide what gets cut or if we can pull money from somewhere else. This is the Stanley Improvement Project that we're hopefully getting also county funds that we're working on an IGA right now with. So we're getting there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the community applied for, so they had an initial Safe Routes to School study grant. Was that the community themselves that applied for that? Because I know
Yeah.
they provide a lot of scaffolding through the PIP program and SAFE to be able to come at this like second actual
Yeah,
implementation.
they absolutely knew the project, so they were able to comment on a lot of things, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
But that community might help us in that application of just showing how much we need this project, right? So I'm hoping that comes through that like, hey, this was, first we've done the study, like you said, now we want to implement those improvements. And hopefully we can do Logos and Stanley in that matter. So if we get all 3 million and we can do both, which will be great. Yeah. So I think about October, we should hear about if that's going to move forward or not, is my understanding. So we got a couple months. So here's a new one. It's called Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. And I was first introduced to this by the county in talking about the intersection at Harmony, Linwood, Railroad intersection. We own the intersection. It is ours. We own the entire thing, which is really sad, I'm sorry to say, for us, because it's really expensive to do what we're gonna do. I don't even know if we can do what we can do. This is in the RTP. It is like a $50 million project in the RTP. It might even be low at this point, as we're starting to like understand some more information about it. We really can't change the level of the railroad. So that means we either have to go pretty much over it. So we have to build the intersection up to go over it, which baffles me. And the railroad will probably not pay a cent to do any of this work. So
Railroad will probably not what?
pay a cent.
Oh,
So this grant program that I found, they've got a lot of money. I think they can't spend it because no one wants to do these projects. But on the other side of things, we're thinking about putting in for a study. Let's see what it's going to cost. I get complaints all the time about this intersection, right? It is a dangerous intersection. But I'm telling you, if we go forward, it's going to take a long time and it's going to be a lot of money, even with an 80% grant match. So, but I feel like if we can do the study, at least we will have that in our back pocket of like, okay, what is our options here to then, make the next decision.
well, and I do think there are some past plans that you can dig out, because as I understood it, when the state was working on a high-speed rail, whenever they move forward on high-speed rail, they plan to double track along Railroad Avenue. And Mark Amba says he's seen a design of this elevated traffic circle that's elevated above the railroad. So I think there was some, I'm sure it's not very highly engineered, but there was some level of design.
The floating roundabout.
That's like 12 or 14 years ago. This has been talked about a lot.
Okay.
This is not a first round, yeah. So I think there are things out there.
All right.
The high speed.
We'll take another peek to see if I can find any other. I knew about the elevated concept, but I was like, really? Okay. So it is due September 23rd. I don't know if I can meet that deadline at this point, so this may get pushed a year. I am trying to bring a consultant on to help me. Actually, I want to do an on-call because I think we might need help also with the RAFA application as well. So I need some more information. We may or may not submit this year for that project, depending on how we're feeling and if we feel like we can put a good application together. If we do, it will be for a study to kind of get a little more information and a new cost estimate and all those fun things, especially if the railroad decides to build that second track.
Who's the funder?
It's a FRA loan, not loan, a grant. Yeah, with an 80% match. So 20% match.
Can our match be in kind? Or does it have to be dollars?
It can be in kind, but we can't use another federal dollar, so
But like staff time could be the match.
I would have to check that. We just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it came up and I was like, I thought it was due in January, so I was a little off on timing and went, oh, September. So we may have to wait a year to do it, but it's one we're checking out and seeing if we have the capability to do. What we are doing though right now is our flexible, regional flexible funding allocation, the RAFA, and we're getting ready to post our letter of intent. We want to do Railroad Avenue. Railroad Avenue is kind of the next one in our CIP that does not have any funds. It's, so it needs federal dollars as far as that goes. This is for 2028 dollars. So this is out there a little ways, which good, gives us some time. But it is, I think we're going to put it in for the first initial kind of study and get to certain part of the design. And then we would take it out again for the final construction.
So, yeah, I had sent Emma an email about RUFA funding because we heard it from Councilor Stavridge's report out of JPACT or C4. I mean, it makes sense to me that it's railroad, but I do feel like, I guess I feel like this is the kind of thing we should start being a little more ahead of the curve on and having more discussion about, I guess, because the other thing out there is the Oak Grove Lake Oswego Bridge, which wouldn't be our project, but it's probably going to take us working with Lake Oswego to move it forward. So I just, I mean, unfortunately, I had followed RUPA discussions, and I had watched a JPAC meeting in the spring, which made me think the RUPA submissions didn't have to be till the March of 2025. And so it came as a big surprise to me when suddenly it's due.
It came to me too as a surprise, honestly. I was at a CTAC meeting, went, wait. I thought we had a few more months as well. And all of a sudden they were like, here we go. Oh, and by the way, your letter's due. The letter is just, it's just no letter of intent. So we can put multiple projects on that letter. We don't necessarily, and we can drop them later if we want to. I don't know if I recommend putting that one though, because it's not in our city limits.
Yeah, and we haven't had the conversations
Okay.
with Lake Oswego that we would need to have. So,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think it's ready.
Okay.
But I do think we need to kind of keep it on the radar screen.
The main proposal will be due in November. We are asking for assistance. They're offering assistance. I don't know how much that means we will get. So we still may use our consultant to help us get that proposal over the threshold.
Yeah, I think it's a good use of funding for this project. I mean, part of like the behind the scenes of being the C4 liaison when we were doing our regional transportation plan is like having this conversation with you and your team about what the other areas of priority are so that we can look for other, opportunities. So Railroad came up with that conversation. And I think it's a really good use for the flexible funding.
Awesome.
Does
And
that say 1.8 million? I thought it was 10 million.
the overall project is 10. We'll probably go for 1.8 for the first phase for design type of deal. So we'll have design kind of ready to go. They, this time it sounds like they want you to kind of have projects shelf ready. So this is like, I guess, a development phase. So they're calling it. So we'll go for development phase and then we'll go for implementation.
So that means we couldn't go for implementation until the next cycle of RUFA?
Yeah,
So we're
or-
talking 2030?
Yes, or it'll, or if we find a different mechanism that we want to use a grant for, because we'll have that in place, right? Having plans, it does go far. Because then they're like, oh, it's shelf ready. Okay, it's ready for construction. So. Yep. And then as far as water goes, I just want to say, I mean, we're getting ready to kick off our 2 water consultants. And the first thing we're doing is, okay, how do we line this up to be able to get grants and funding for our water projects that we're gonna have over the next, 5 years. So we're already building that in to the conversation right from the beginning of starting design and studies and moving that forward. So, super exciting.
And to your point, your good point, Mayor, about the sort of however we can, being proactive about this. Again, as the seed I want to plant in your heads as you think about the future of policy lanes or hot topics or passion areas or goals is sort of how that can be a catalyst for some of this and a way for you to be keeping your eyes open and raising questions, but also if we're going to be looking, if we can get in a situation where we're looking 6 months ahead on some of your high priorities and slotting things into the forecaster, we can hopefully catch more of that stuff. All right.
So this was captioned as grants, but obviously when it comes to the water, when it comes to some of the infrastructure projects, it's not just grants per se, but it's also legislative appropriations, right? There are some opportunities to get either, federal appropriations or state government. The state gave a lot of cities $1 to $3 million to build infrastructure to serve housing development, for example. I mean, I guess I just want to, just us all to keep in mind that the potential outside funding isn't always grants, and sometimes it's a legislative, it's an appropriation or whatever. I mean, I think, for example, the water, I see a lot of funding going to water and sewer projects from the state.
I mean, I think they're gonna have to with the requirement of PFAS, like, cities aren't gonna be able to,
Right.
especially they want it implemented so quickly, like, I'm hoping we can find some resources.
Okay, just to keep us moving because of time, the three others that you saw on our matrix in the staff report, Metro 2040 Planning and Development Grants, we're considering going after those for Hubs Phase 3. We probably would not be able to pull that off by September 6th. That's the next due date. But the exciting thing for Metro 2040 is they're moving to just a rolling cycle. It's starting in 25. So we'll have many more opportunities to pursue those funds. We are looking at, or we submitted in March, a PFAS feasibility grant through OHA and Business Oregon. And then thank you to Councilor Anderson for sending us the Oregon Community Paths grant opportunity. It's a super cool program. Looking through our CIP right now, this is specifically about trails and converting rail lines or other things into paths and pathways. We just, we're lucky to have the trolley trail. We love that. We just didn't see a lot of other ripe projects in our current list. We're happy to dig a little deeper into that and see if there's anything that could qualify. But I think that the paths we would have would be like multi-use paths along a roadway. And based on our initial read of the criteria, it didn't seem like those were the types of projects they were looking for in this.
We can take out a railroad, right? And like,
There you go.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, that would be.
So is council aware of any other potential pursuits that you want us to pursue? Mayor, I know you brought up a few in our one-on-one yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's good that we're having this discussion, on the heels of the policy lanes and thinking about council goals, because I think, depending on, there are other grant pools out there. There are placemaking grants, there are economic development type grants, downtown revitalization type grants. There are things like that. There are, I had another one in mind, I came to mind this morning, but now it's gonna escape me. There are other pools of grants out there, but they're not, and I do get a lot of things in my email, but they're not, council goals. They don't align with a current project. They might be, in 6 months, we may have different council goals, and there may be other pots of grants we want to pursue, but I have not raised those because they haven't, related to a council goal or an ongoing, CIP project that I know of. But I do think there are some grants like that, we can try and keep an eye on as we move forward in our, in our lanes and think about future council goals.
What the SAFE grant, that grant match I spoke to you about, is that the same pool of money that these other SAFE projects?
That's the SS for A that
Yeah.
they sent us. Uh-huh.
Okay.
So we put in for Harrison for that one. This was in the staff report, but just briefly, and Jen talked about for some of these, having some consultant support or external support, putting them together. It is something I'm definitely open to. Councilor Kosrabati put us in touch with this exciting organization called Grant Match that helps find and then write the grants for you, which I think is really great. They do take 10%. Their fee is if they win the grant. And then it's 10% up to $1 million. And then I think it's 5% on anything over $1 million, which can be hefty. And for a city of our size, that can be pretty big. But if there was a really big thing, we were willing to kind of proactively plan for having that margin to pay to them. It's not off the table at all. I also think, the Safe Routes to School one's a great example of we've got community wisdom and leaders who can help us put these things together. So I'm very open to models that spread the wealth in terms of the time it takes to put a grant together. We just have to think about the back end of it too. It's one thing to win a grant, it's another thing to then administer a grant.
How does that fee factor into the application? Like which line item do you put that into? Because indirect can be limited on, or, indirect or administration can be limited. So where does that come from?
I think the city has to budget, the municipality has to budget for it separately. It's a separate risk they're almost taking on. The grant match did not have a lot of local, like West Coast or Northwest clients. They had more like East Coast and Canadian clients who they've been working with, but yeah.
But the funds would come out of the grant, if I'm mistaken. I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was separate.
They don't charge you anything if they don't get you the grant. If you don't get the grant, then it's not the same cost. But I get 10% is, I just looked at it as a, because I know staff we're doing in-house grants. I just looked at it as maybe taking that burden off the staff because sometimes we do miss grants. And this was just a way to maybe contract out, I guess, quote unquote, and then because we would only pay a fee when the grant was, we won it. But yeah, I'm for the community. There's a lot of community members that know how to write grants. I'm trying to learn how to write grants right now. But that's a big deal, and maybe we can do something where when it's a community-related grant, that's when you can go out and work with them, because that also, I'm sure, takes burden off of staff. I don't know if there's maybe even discussion for a stipend to provide community members for the time that they commit to that stuff. But I'm just, yeah.
There's definitely models to, and I'd like to talk to other cities, that around here of our scale that are doing things like that, because it's not a unique Milwaukie problem. Yeah, I remember at Portland, we had a grants team. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, and I've actually heard of cities sharing. I told Emma I knew that like some cities had hired an outside grants guy. I went to Independence for their Main Street conference and they had a guy who had done multiple grants. But I have actually, now that I think of it, heard of like cities partnering, 2 or 3 cities partnering with them.
Do that too.
Yeah.
Share the cost.
So just before we turn it over to Parks, I want to make sure if you had any other questions or concerns about that active pursuit list, you can let us know. And then I think I'll leave those last ones sort of as things for you to noodle on as we work on, our policy lane future. How do you want to be kept apprised, and how might this align with those?
Well, I've got a question. I mean, Jennifer's got, a handle on this as the city engineer, but what about the other departments? I mean, any other departments pursuing grants?
Public Works?
Yeah, Public Works got an energy trust for the solar panels that are being installed. That's a grant.
Yeah.
We got the the seismic upgrades for the public safety building. That was the Public Works one as well.
I think the opportunity space would, maybe the place where we're not pursuing maybe as much as we could is broader community development and planning. So some of those economic development pieces. Again, I put so many titles on Joseph Brilio that I can't quite put
It's his next step.
writer, yeah. But I think that's an area where we really could be. Yeah. Okay, anything else on grants?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And I just want to make sure everyone got to meet Tanya, our new civil engineer.
Welcome.
So happy to have Tanya here.
Hope we didn't bore you.
And she's jumping into the Monroe Greenway, which
She is.
is great.
Yes.
There you go.
Exciting.
Open house, September 12th. Right.
Nice.
I don't know if I'm back to, they already sent out.
Which is, it'll be.
That's good.
Park.
Yeah, Wichita.
At Wichita Park. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oops.
We're gonna go real fast.
Well, we all got your email.
You don't know everything. Been some developments in the last few hours.
Here you go.
For those who don't know me, I'm Adam Moore, I'm the Parks Development Coordinator here at the city of Milwaukee. I've got my friend Ben Johnson here who's gonna go on a tour with us. Ben is with Greenworks. You might know Ben from his role in the Parks and Rec Board. He served as chair for a long time. You just want to remind everybody, Ben recused himself from the project on both ends prior to Greenworks submitting an RFQ, went through a full competitive process. Ben stayed recused on the project. It wasn't until there was a staff change at Greenworks, after we were already a year into the project, that Ben stepped down from the Parks and Rec Board early and then joined the project officially. So, but Ben is here. Ben will go on the tour with us. We're going to get to see Scott Park. It was a concrete day, very busy day. We will pouring concrete again tomorrow. And then, well, we'll just jump right into the update and let you know. So as I said, we're going to give the briefest of updates. We're able to give a brief update because the news is mostly good. We are mostly on time and we are mostly on budget. Now, there's an asterisk there. That's because there's been a lot of city decisions that have got us here. And in being consistent with our community engagement, we want to make sure that we do this update to keep you in the community involved. Now, we aren't ballparking this. Every single cent is tracked every day, all the hours. They're tracked very heavily, but I don't want to lose sight of the park or the forest from the trees here. Then we're going to go on a brief tour of Scott Park. Staff and council are welcome to join us. I did order you guys twice, actually, high-vis vests. Little delivery mix-ups, so sorry. Hope you all had closed-toe shoes, though. For those who can't go on the tour, we do have drone videos supplied by Greenworks of each of the three parks. Those are on the city's YouTube channel. You can see what the parks look like back in July 13th. I know we have a new council person. Hi, nice to meet you. We got new people in new roles. Congratulations. We also have some new Parks and Rec Board members, and so they will be probably watching this to get caught up a little bit. Just a few bullet points. So we were asked not only to build these three parks, Scott, Bowman Gray, and Belfour in 3 years, but also do equity-based engagement. And I use the quotation marks because we let the community define what equity-based engagement meant. And so we worked with members of the Equity Steering Committee, that's the ESC, and Parks and Rec Board, PAR, and staffs. And so one thing that I think sometimes gets missed on this project is we have been working at staff level with NCPRD from the very beginning of this project. The RFQ that went out to hire Greenworks was reviewed by NCPRD. They sat on that review team along with a number of city staff and a Parks and Rec Board member. They came to all of our engagements. Kevin Kaysen over there is probably getting real sick of my emails. He was last at JCB last Friday, just to kind of give you an idea. So at a staff level, we've always talked about it at the Parks and Rec Board and as a staff is we have a job to do. Council, you have some things to discuss with the county commissioners as the NCPRD Board of Directors, but as staff, right? We have a job to do, and so we're going to work together. And that's what we're doing. Speaking of grants, this project is 97% grant funded. $2.25 million of that comes from ARPA funding. That's American Recovery Plan Act dollars, AKA COVID stimulus dollars. Those are federal dollars that come from the state. So we're very thankful to Senator Kathleen Taylor and former Representative Karin Power, who helped us receive the funding. That serves as the base. There are several other grants in the pot, including 2 that we wrote after the plans were approved by council. We knew that we weren't going to be able to afford the full wants and needs of meeting our equity goals, particularly around those playgrounds, if we didn't go out after some additional funds. Luckily, we got both of those grants, including one that's specifically for Scott Park. And that's allowed us to be able to weather all the little obstacles that we've faced, as well as enhance the design. In our engagement, and we did engagement through regular planning board meetings, open houses. We did pop-up engagements at Juneteenth and Pride and the Fiesta last fall. We did focus groups. We brought 30 pizzas down to the Boys and Girls Club, Ben and I did, and met with school children, most of whom go to school in Milwaukie, and we picked out playground equipment. We worked with FACT Oregon, which is a statewide organization working with families with a family member living with a disability to help us with that accessibility and inclusive piece. We also did focus groups and interviews with people living with disabilities. So we did a ton of engagement. And just so you're all aware, if you gave us your email address and said, "Hey, I want the city to contact me," you got an email just like you all did today, letting them know, "Hey, here's an update on the project in case you want to know what's going on, and here's my email in case you want to reach me." So we received over 1,000 surveys during that engagement process and through that design process. 14% of that came from people who identified as being Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. And 38% of those came from people who said they were new to the Milwaukie planning process. About 63% of those live in the city. We've got some other statistics, but I want to jump into the new stuff here. So looking at the budget, I said we were mostly on budget. So right now we are operating with a small contingency. We think that that will be enough to get us through the next few months of construction. We have enhanced the designs of all 3 parks. I'm going to talk about each of the 3 parks specifically when we talk about those enhancements. There have been several unforeseen circumstances, right? Examples of those are like, oh, hey, here's a park with a couple septic tanks in the ground that we didn't know about.
Oh, my.
Oh, here's another park where the pipes under the ground aren't exactly where the plan said they were going to be. Now, do we do a manhole? Can we do a manhole? Should it be in the street? Should it not be? What's it going to do to us budget and time-wise? Actually, we're just going to do a clean out. Thank you. We did receive an additional donation. So the Historic Milwaukie Neighborhood Association just reached out to us. They would like to cover the cost of part of one of the park benches. It was something that they wanted to do at another park. They saw an opportunity with this one, and so that's actually going to help us out with this, just because grant dollars are all written for specific things. There are very specific categories that I have to break down all of our invoices in. Donations are really nice because they go to one specific thing and that's it, especially at this level. And we, of course, we do have funds saved for a celebration in March. And you might be saying, "Hey, Adam, what are you talking about?" I thought we were going to do something in the fall. And what we've decided as a staff is that the possibility for good weather is much better in March. Also, it has become extremely hard for me to tell you exactly when each one of the parks are going to open. And that's because of all these enhancements and some of these unforeseen activities. And I can't start doling out contracts for entertainers and food carts and things like that. I don't know exactly, if I'm not confident when that's going to open. And so we decided the best thing to do is to have a spring celebration, which I'll talk more about later, but save that money for the celebration and do our final engagement that's required in our grants, and do it in the spring where we might have some nice weather, as opposed to say November when it's already a very busy event season and everybody's going on. So Bowman Bray Park, there is some news here. But first I want to get to the good stuff. We have enhanced Bowman Bray Park. We do have a fully paved perimeter path around the entire park. We will see additional privacy fencing along Ware Ellis Lane. We'll have additional accessible table and accessible benches in the park, and there will be a lot more plants than we expected there. And that's enhancements that we've been able to make because our bid came in under estimate and under budget. We will be complete by mid-October. Exactly what date, is it gonna be the 11th, is it gonna be the 15th? I don't know right now. We'll send out an email and let everybody know when the construction fences are down. But we're gonna save that celebration for the spring. We did have a challenge with the playground equipment, and we just heard back from the manufacturer and the vendor. There is a play structure going into Bowman Bray Park. It's made out of wood. It's a very unique design. While we've been staging it in our public works facility, we've been watching it weather, and we're not confident that it's going to meet our goals for safety and durability. So what we've decided to do is we are actually going to be sending that piece of equipment back. We are going to get a replacement piece of equipment. But in order to make sure the park still opens and that we meet our goals, we're going to still put in the swing set and all the safety surface. So the park will be able to open in October. It's just going to be missing that one play structure there, unfortunately. These things do happen, but it's better to be safe than sorry in this perspective. And so we did just clean that up with the manufacturer a couple hours ago.
So can I ask,
Yeah.
the park opening this fall, the last park built was Wichita, and the county, I mean, NCPRD built that one, really. But they kept it closed for quite a while after completion because of the sod, because of wanting the sod to settle or, you know, whatever. Is that a consideration here?
We are growing out of seed.
Oh, are you? Okay.
We are
Okay.
growing out of seed.
Okay.
Our goal, if you asked our construction patriarch, he would tell you, we're gonna get those parks done regardless of that extra time you gave us. That was my best Scott Paul impersonation. So we still think that we might hit that mid-October date for all of them, or that end of October date for all of them. We just don't know right now. But the construction team's goal is to get that grass grown, cut a couple times before we hit that really wet weather and put them to bed for the season. So. Belfour Park, so
Is that gonna be a soft opening?
all three of them will be soft
Okay,
openings.
okay.
We're gonna take down the fences, we're gonna tell everybody it's open. If there is a desire and there is time and budget for a tour, invitation only amongst grant funders, decision makers, councils, et cetera, you might be able to put something like that together. But it was just decided that a spring park
That's fine.
party that encompasses all three was better than just going to one and saying, well, the other two will be done soon. Belfour Park. Belfour Park, you're gonna see additional fencing across both east and west side of the park. You're gonna see additional benches, you're gonna see additional planting, you're gonna see a lot more rock. Some of this is decorative, some of these are benches, some of these are retaining walls. Most of them are a combination of all three. That will be completed by early November. The reason for the delay there is when you're standing down in the hole and you're looking up at the earth above you, sometimes you think of things a little bit differently than you do when looking at them on paper. And so the city made the decision that we wanted to bring in a geotechnical engineer to review our design. Turns out our design was just fine. We did add a little bit more to that wall. The review of the design is done. And now we can all be very confident that the people sitting in these chairs 5 years from now, 10 years from now, wherever else, can feel really comfortable about that. And when you see a picture of it, it might make sense why we brought in that geotech. Also, early on in the project, as we're building those ADA paths, through the park around the trees. The way that apple tree that the community loves and told us to save, the way it leans and the branches hang down, there's just no room to build a compliant cement pathway in front of that tree. So that's just all gonna be grass instead. Scott Park. So Scott Park here, we saw the largest enhancement. We were able to take that grant that we wrote specifically for Scott Park. We worked with the Parks and Rec Board and the library staff to just outside that back corner there. You can almost see it from here next to the gym. Underneath the shade of the trees, you're gonna have a gravel pad, which will be best for the tree roots there. There was just no way we could get cement in there. Then we went down to Carlton, Oregon, and picked out some really beautiful giant logs. Those are gonna serve as our perimeter seating. In the center, you're gonna have some beautiful basalt stone seating. And then in the corner of the decorative fencing, you're gonna have our oversized storyteller's chair. And so we see this as like an outdoor classroom or an outdoor story time space that we can use, or just a place where somebody can get cozy underneath the shade of the trees. So we have this giant 5 by 5 by 6 or 7 feet tall, custom-made log chair. I've seen the sketches, it's gorgeous. Ben and the team did a great job on that. And that's gonna go right underneath the shade of the trees there. And so that was a big enhancement that we brought to the project. This one will be completed by the end of October, right? When you add in a bunch of work, you do have to give them a little bit of time. You will also see additional fencing. You're gonna see a lot of additional natural benches. We're using the existing logs that are on site as benches. We've got some rocks set up and our retaining walls to be benches. You're gonna see additional decorative railings for the amphitheater. And then, of course, public art will be coming sometime around Thanksgiving. I haven't seen the concepts yet. The artist is working on the final concept. We're gonna see those at a joint meeting next week. The Arts Committee and Parks and Rec Board are gonna meet up at 6:15 next week in the community room. And they're gonna get to see the near final concept, ask some questions about it. That art is gonna go directly across from the storytime area, the outdoor classroom, right by the commons. So it'll be really easy to install. And then save the date, March 8th, right? So we are going to celebrate all 3 parks. That could include a tour of all 3 parks. It could be a bicycle ride to all 3 parks with some buses for folks that can't do it. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. We've been calling it Milwaukee's 3-park circus. We've got a lot of time now to figure out how to do that. I do know it's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, the parks will be open. Once they're open for everybody to use, everybody to program. So the library can jump in and start using that right away. If they open up early, we will certainly let everybody know. If there's a delay, we will certainly let everybody know.
So if you were waiting for good weather, March 8th does seem a little on the early side.
It is a little bit on the early side. My position, I'm only here through the end of March. And then
And the end of March is spring break, so.
Then the end of March is spring break. You start getting into extremely busy event season in May because June has Pride and Juneteenth, as well as a lot of other celebrations. And so looking at the event schedule, it was, if we can't get this in October, the soonest we can do it is March 8th, was kind of the thought process there. And then here's a look at that wall, and you can see here, right, we have the property line, then we have a 9-foot hole, an ADA path will be there, another rock wall with a slide going through it, and then a playground, and then underneath that, we actually found a septic tank. Septic tank is taken care of, but right, if there's any wall on this project that we absolutely, without question, have to nail, right? It's not just good enough for the gold medal, we've gotta have the record on this wall. This is the one. And so that's why you're gonna see, that's why you've seen a little bit of delay at Belfour. But along the way, we've been able to make a lot of enhancements. We've been able to absorb most of the challenges that we've seen on site. This one with Bowman Bray and the play structure is unfortunate, but we are working with the manufacturer and we'll get that installed as soon as we can. We will have preliminary designs on Monday. There are other pieces that we spec'd out with the Boys and Girls Club and our other pieces that we know fit in that space. So we do have a head start, and we have told them that that new structure has to be in by the end of April so that it's ready for the celebration in March.
End of April?
Oops, other way around.
Okay.
It has to be available for March. Of course, if you or any of the community members have questions, you can shoot me an email. But if you'd like, we can go over to Scott Park. But it is 5 minutes to 6, so it's completely up to you.
Yeah,
I just want to go. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to stay here so that Nicole gets to go with you and see the beautiful thing. And I'll mind the chambers, but enjoy your tour. And Counselor Stavanger, I have food for you.
What shoes you got on?
Not good ones. I'll have to